Let me tell you quickly the story, what happened. So I was in Japan. I'd started several businesses or solutions within the company in Japan. It was going very well. By about the third year, we were really starting to see the results. And in the fourth year, things were really cruising along smoothly, where you want to be as a leader. And then I got the call from Amsterdam. And this was a life-changing call. And, my boss said this, "Hey, Paul, things are going well for you in Japan." And I said, "Yes, sir. Thank you." He said, "Good. Time for a change." Every leader who's watching this gets it.
Yeah.
We all know that, you only grow when you step outside of your comfort zone. But to make a very long story short, I decided to go off and tackle this challenge. So you had a team that was kind of in disarray. I was there or sent there to turn it around.
Welcome back to Asia AIM, the podcast that shines a light on the people, ideas, and innovations shaping business, marketing, and communications in Japan and across the APAC region. I'm your host, Robert Heldt. Today, we're talking about a topic that's at the heart of doing business in Asia, leading cross-cultural teams. This is something every leader in the region wrestles with, and my guest today has a wealth of experience to share. Paul Dupuis is the founder and CEO of Take 5 Global, a consultancy focused on leadership development and coaching. He is also the former CEO and chairman of Randstad Japan and the former managing director and CEO of Randstad India, where he led record growth and guided teams through some of the toughest times, earning him recognition as one of India's best leaders in times of crisis by the Great Place to Work Institute. What makes Paul's journey so inspiring is that he didn't start in the corner office. He came to Japan as a 22-year-old backpacker with just $300 in his pocket. He slept on park benches on his first nights and worked his way up to lead billion-dollar organizations across Asia. He's captured many of his leadership lessons in his book, The E5 Movement, Leadership Through the Rule of Five. I highly recommend it for anybody leading organizations anywhere in the world. Paul, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Robert, for the very kind introduction. I'm really glad to be here. And by the way, congratulations to you again on your journey as you move on to the next stage as your company continues to evolve and change the game.
Thank you, Paul. Paul, you came to Japan at 22, $300 in your pocket, ended up leading billion-dollar businesses across Asia. Congratulations. That's amazing. Looking back, how did that journey shape the way you lead cross-cultural teams?
Well, thank you. It has been quite a journey. I mean, I actually just celebrated the 35th anniversary of arriving in Japan from Canada with a backpack and about $300, my life savings, and landed in Osaka. And, I'd intended to be here for 6 months, and here we are 35 years later. I've had the opportunity to live in Singapore and lead a company across APAC, Asia Pacific, and then also back to Japan, and then off to incredible India, and we'll talk more about that. But, my journey has been full of twists and turns and surprises, and I've had so much support along the way. And I think as a result of kind of leaving my comfort zone and my own world in Canada and going off and leading across borders, I think I've got a broader view of the world. And again, very grateful for the opportunities I've had.
Yeah, and congratulations on 35 years in Japan. You've worked across Japan, India, Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea. That's quite a mix of cultures, right? So from your experience, what really stood out about how leadership is viewed or expected in these countries?
So it's interesting, growing up in Canada, I had kind of a view of leadership in the context of my own upbringing and in, let's say, the culture that I was raised in. But the moment you step out of your world and you enter into a different world where things are maybe done differently and where the mindsets are a bit different. Of course, we're talking about business culture, but even lifestyle, religion, and so on. Start to discover there are many ways to do things. And of course, that affects leadership, right? So if we talk about leadership for a moment, if you take India and Japan and put them on a continuum, probably India's on one end and Japan's on the far other end. And every country and culture is somewhere in between. You would know this well, Robert, considering your strong connection with India and Japan. the opportunity to go off to India was a game changer for me. It really made me rethink kind of everything about leadership. But along the way, I had an aha moment. And here's what I discovered. Effective leadership is actually timeless and borderless. It's not about the differences of leading in one place or another. It's about the similarities. In other words, what is effective wherever you go? And not only in the business environment, if we talk about sports as a coach or a captain or a general manager, we talk about politics, the arts, science, and go on and on. So just a couple of questions for you. If you were to think about leadership, and if I were to ask you, would you follow a leader who has your back in good times and bad?
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah, that's you, by the way. I know you well, Robert, that you're that kind of leader. So, I could go around the world and ask that question. I guarantee you're going to get yes, right? Yeah. Another question would be, would you follow a leader who's always honest and transparent?
Mm-hmm. Of course, yeah.
Obviously, the answer is going to be yes. And by the way, you can go around the world and ask the same question. So I started to discover if you list up 20, 30 questions similar to those about leadership, you get yes pretty well wherever you go in the world. So that was my aha moment. Effective leadership is borderless. 90% of being a good leader works anywhere you go, any environment, by the way. The 10% is that kind of magic dust, and I would call it the localization, understanding how things are done in that local culture, pushing the right buttons and levers. And we know in Japan, there are certain ways of doing things versus in India. And once you crack that code and combine that with the universality of effective leadership, it can really make the change.
Yeah, at Randstad India, you led huge turnaround during some very, very difficult times there. What did that experience teach you about leading in Asia that you can still apply today?
Well, that was let me tell you quickly the story, what happened. So I was in Japan. I had started several businesses or solutions within the company in Japan. It was going very well. By about the third year, we were really starting to see the results. Then in the fourth year, things were really cruising along smoothly, where you want to be as a leader. And then I got the call from Amsterdam. And this was a life-changing call. And, my boss said this, "Hey, Paul, things are going well for you in Japan." And I said, "Yes, sir. Thank you." He said, "Good. Time for a change." Every leader who's watching this gets it.
Yeah.
We all know that, you only grow when you step outside of your comfort zone. So that was an important moment. And I realized that he was right. But the difference was that I wasn't 22 years old with a backpack anymore. I had family. So there's bigger things to think about. But to make a very long story short, I decided to go off and tackle this challenge, of course, with support of my family. And the challenge was this. This was a ship that was shaking on the verge of sinking in India. It was an acquisition that was done of a local staffing firm with pan-India coverage. It was a large organization with more than 70,000 employees in total, including the temporary contractors. And it wasn't hitting its target, so it was in the red. We had a high attrition, very low employee engagement, satisfaction, one of the worst in the world of the company. And the strategy was fragmented. So you had a team that was kind of in disarray. I was sent there to turn it around. Massive challenge. And frankly, I'd never been to India, knew nothing about the incredible I would call the United States of India, right? 29 states with so many different cultures and ways of doing things. Didn't know anything about the laws of the land and so on. But I arrived and I followed what I said earlier about universality of leadership. I made a commitment to be that leader who was engaged, who would listen first, who would be transparent, but who also would make courageous decisions. So one of my key missions was to make courageous decisions about people. And we had to do that. We had to get some people off the bus, get the right people on the bus, in the right seats. That's to borrow good to great Jim Collins, right? And again, the short story is that we turned it around. It was an amazing experience. And people often ask me, Paul, how did you do it? I didn't do it. I arrived with some matches and I lit some fires and got people excited about the possibility. That was really it. And the execution happened on the ground. And that to me was an amazing experience, really tough, but I grew a lot as a leader and as a person.
Yeah. And remind me again, when was this that you were sent to India? Because I remember you were there during the pandemic. Go ahead.
Yeah, 2017 to 2021. Yeah. So I was, Yeah, that's a big part of this story.
Mm-hmm.
We started to turn around the ship. We stabilized, it turned around, accelerated, started to deliver best ever results.
Yeah.
The mood was amazing. The wind was at our backs.
Yeah.
And then 2020 came, and
Yeah.
we hit that wall of COVID, and that was especially tough. Not from only the business perspective. I mean, it really kind of brought us not to a standstill, but it slowed us down like everyone in the world. And then it was a massive shift in my mind about focusing on growing the business, delivering results, building a high-performing team, to safety.
Exactly.
As a CEO, the role of ensuring that people are safe. And it was such a tough time in India, as you know well, Robert. In 2020 and 2021, India was really brought to its knees. And it was a really challenging time for me as a leader, but I learned the importance of one of the roles of the leader is to keep people safe physically and psychologically.
Yeah, and it's a people business, right? Bring stability, so you can change your mindset from let's grow and let's expand and to like, you're humbled, so to speak, right? And then you really need to change how you lead in that particular moment. Yeah, and I think your book, The E5 Movement, captures this so very well. In the book, you talk about envision, express, excite, enable, and execute, right? How do these 5 pillars shift in meaning when you're leading cross-cultural teams?
So the story behind the book is interesting. I was actually great timing. The company sent me to London Business School on a course on transformational leadership. So here I was in the middle of leading transformation in India. And I was able to kind of step out of that pressure cooker several times throughout a year and dig into what it really means to be a transformational leader and to lead transformation. And along the way, I was inspired to write the book. In fact, I was assigned a coach as part of this program. And the coach asked me, and I would encourage everyone who's watching to think about this question. The question was this: what is great leadership? We all have ideas about, what makes a great leader, but define it, describe it. And so he asked me, and I had a lot of ideas on this. I had thought about this a lot, and I was in the middle of this, let's say, this messy situation. And so I shared my thoughts about leadership, and he stopped me partway. He goes, "Stop, Paul, you need to write a book." That was the first time anyone said that to me. And of course, my default reaction is, I'm not a writer. Fast forward, a few more people nudged me, suggested that I write a book. So I wrote the book when I was in India, as you said, the E5 movement. Yeah. It was later released in Japanese, the Japanese version, which has become a bestseller. And in here, I write a lot about my experience in India and also Japan. And I talk about kind of the elements of my experience as a leader. And it wraps around 5 E's, as you said. So the first E is envision. And this is, for many leaders, the toughest one, because we need to start with, coming up with a vision that is not rooted in what or how much. A lot of companies or leaders will say, we're going to be the biggest XYZ. We're going to be the most profitable. We're going to be, whatever it is. But it tends to be about measurable outcomes, right? Well, actually, the envision element is not about what, it's about why. We hear a lot about purpose now.
Yep.
There's a wonderful quote from Jim Rohn, the author, who said, when the why is clear, the how is easy. So start with why. Simon Sinek also talks about that.
Yeah.
So envision starts with why, touches the hearts and the minds. Heart first, mind next. Next, You've got a great vision. It's powerful. Next is to go out and express it. The second E, right? Tell the world about it. And you're an expert in this, Robert. This is omni-channel. In our current world, it's not about, standing in front of people expressing the message. You have to leverage all the different channels and touch points to connect with people, especially in a hybrid world. The third E, this is when things start to move, the momentum, the wheels start to move. That's excite. People are leaning in. They want to be part of it. And as a leader, as a fellow leader, that's when it gets fun, right? Because people want to actually participate, be involved. And the fourth E, which I found especially challenging, was enable, or is enable. Enable is really about creating an environment where everybody shines, letting everybody be the best version of themselves. Instead of you as the leader picking up the hammer, you're teaching others how to use it, and you're letting them experiment and learn. That's enabling leadership. And then, of course, the final E, and this will be until the end of time. This all sounds nice, but you need to deliver on the final E, which is execute. Bring the vision to life for measurable impact.
Yeah, and I think you also added an extra E, in our conversations, which is about empathy, right? E for empathy, right? And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we touched a
Yeah.
little bit about the crisis in India that you're navigating, right? So how does empathy help you kind of lead, India during the pandemic, and then navigate Japan's changing work culture, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Empathy, you think about it, rewind back to the old days. I'm talking 30 years ago. IQ, the intelligence quotient, was a predictor of high performance. So we used to say in organizations that if you had a high IQ, you would be on a fast track towards becoming a leader, a senior leader. Then we discovered that the most intelligent people don't necessarily make the best leaders. Intelligence is not enough to be an effective leader. Then we introduced this concept of EQ, right?
EQ.
So we talk about emotional quotient, and empathy was built into that. And we started to measure leaders on, are they showing empathy? Are they showing care? Are they relating, engaging with their employees? And then I discovered in India that actually that's not enough. You have to have a reasonable level of intelligence to be a leader. You need to have a certain amount of empathy where you feel for people, as well as you need to be, firm. But then during COVID, I discovered that empathy is feeling how the other person's feeling. But actually, it doesn't talk about action. And so I discovered the importance of a third one, which is compassion.
Yeah.
So empathy with action is compassion, actually doing something about it. Now, someone in your operation on your team is struggling. You feel for them, you might give them some advice and so on. But then when the call is done or the meeting is done, it's finished, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually, compassion says that when the call is done and the meeting is done, that's when it begins. That's when the leader starts to take action to enable that person to get over that wall or whatever challenge they're facing. So for me, I discovered the power of being a compassionate leader to really make change.
Thank you. Yeah, very, very wise words. And yeah, that's something, we all struggle with as leaders. And I think it's something that we are working on to build that because it's all about results. It's all about you're short for time, right? There's so much to do. And as the organizations grow, your challenges grow and so on. Which brings me to this concept of Kaizen. You've compared Kaizen, continuous improvement in Japan, with Jugaad in India, which is frugal innovation. Two very different approaches to problem solving. And yeah, so coming from India myself, I struggled with it, and I still talk about it with my teams about how do we embrace Jugaad in solving problems and being innovative here in Japan and adapting. Our industry is going through lots of changes, so we constantly need to adapt. So how can leaders balance these two mindsets when managing diverse teams? In my team, we've got 12 nationalities, speak 15 languages, and we're a small team, but we're still very diverse and very international. Something I struggle with a lot. So what advice would you give for, how can we balance these two mindsets?
Well, let's talk about the fourth E, enabling leadership. And by the way, what you described, your diversity in your organization, and you're in Japan. Let's add that in, and you're in Japan, right? Which is in many ways very complicated, as we know. But actually, when you crack the code, as we've discussed, you can do amazing things in Japan. So probably you could turn it around and say the diversity you have in your team is a superpower. But the superpower needs to be unleashed. And the enabling leader unleashes the superpower. Okay, so if you start with every individual on your team coming from different places and different lenses on how they see the world, the enabling leader thinks about each individual and how to help them bring their best selves to work and make an impact and shine and enjoy. Of course, when people do that, they stay and they continue to add value, right? So that's one. Let's go back to Jugaad and Kaizen. So being in Japan a long time, naturally, Kaizen kind of gets into your DNA. And Kaizen, by the way, if we study Kaizen and lean manufacturing and Six Sigma, it's quite complicated. If you go through all the steps and you study it, it's quite academic and quite scientific. I like to simplify it. In fact, when I went to India and I brought Kaizen with me, I took the spirit of kind of embracing hashtags to express a complicated idea in a simple way. So the hashtag was this, hashtag BTY. Kaizen is BTY. BTY stands for better than yesterday. So simply put, Kaizen is about being a bit better than yesterday. It's that 1 degree of improvement, that 1%, just moving that needle just a little bit and striving to be a bit better than yesterday. The beauty of Kaizen is that when you do that over a long period of time, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, the cumulative impact of trying to be better than yesterday is massive.
Yeah.
Right? But it's slow. That's Kaizen. That's the Japanese concept. It requires consensus. Everyone needs to participate. Okay. Then go over to India. This thing called Jugaad. And I'm so glad you're sharing it, Robert. I think where Kaizen is coming into our vocabulary naturally, Jugaad will come soon. Jugaad is an amazing thing in India, which, as you said, frugal, innovation, ingenuity. Simple way to put it is, let's just find a way to get this done. We have limited resources. Let's just figure it out and let's be creative. And I saw that in play, not only in the workplace, but just in, in day-to-day life. You see Jugaad on the streets everywhere in India, just very creative ways to get the job done.
Yeah.
And that spirit of creativity, let's try, speed, and Kaizen, meticulous focus on quality improvement, 1% better. Now, those two, in a way, are opposites.
Yeah.
But if you combine them, it's a magical combination. And I'm very lucky to be able to have had the Kaizen DNA, bring it to India, learn about this amazing thing, Jugaad, and then also bring that back to Japan and combine that. That's actually one of my key missions now, is to help organizations do that.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. With work culture changing, hybrid work, AI, employee expectations are changing as well. So what leadership muscles do you think leaders need to build right now to be able to be future ready to lead the future generation, right?
Yeah. So really good question. And this is actually one of my key missions right now. I'm working with organizations and leaders to help them be future ready. Well, if we go back to the traditional version of leadership, traditionally, I'm talking old-fashioned leadership now. Think about 4 quadrants of leadership. The directive leader, just do it. The commander, right? Just do it. And we both have to do that sometimes. That's the nature of leadership, especially during times of crisis. The next quadrant is the achievement-oriented leader. The leader is always talking about the top of the mountain, the goal, the target, achieving, the results, right? Again, sometimes you need to be that leader. If we go to the third quadrant, it's the participative leader, the leader who's in the game, who uses language like, let's figure this out. You have an issue with a client, let's go see the client. Rather than you, it's us, it's we, let's. So that leader's in the game. And then the fourth quadrant, the fourth type of leader, let's say, is the supportive leader. This is the leader who is enabling, cheering from the side, encouraging, sometimes pushing, pulling, sometimes tough, strict, firm, sometimes warm. Again, so creating an environment where people are challenged but supported as well, right? So those 4 quadrants of leadership, when you think about those, the effective leader cannot stay in one place, cannot be a directive leader always. People will shut down. Eventually, actually, that can lead to mutiny as well, right? You don't build followership by being a directive leader always. Yeah. Same thing goes with the achievement-oriented leader. One is always talking about getting to the top of the mountain, but is not enabling and providing the tools. Yeah. That leader will also not build followership. And back to participative support. So it's really about fluid leadership. That is a muscle of future-ready leaders. The ability to know where to be at the right time, what role to play at the right time. And to be consistent in being fluid. That's one. Another one I would say is, we talk about CEO, the word CEO or the title CEO. I always found the E, executive, to be very vague. If you ask 10 people, what does the E in CEO mean, executive? Define it. What exactly does it mean? You're going to get a lot of different definitions and people are really not sure. It's extremely vague. So I think that's also where this discussion begins on future ready muscles. And I would say one is engagement, the ability to engage with colleagues, to engage with internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, really connect and understand what makes them tick, and then provide that, deliver on that. So engagement to me is such an important muscle, the ability to do that. The other one, we talk about agility, of course. Well, we learned that lesson in COVID. I think the organizations that were solidly committed to one way of doing things suddenly found themselves in trouble. Yeah. So the agility, the ability to pivot, to have the guts to pivot, is also important. And one more I'd like to add is humility. And humility, as a muscle might sound strange, but I'll tell you what, a lot of leaders have a hard time asking for advice. The strongest leaders I know are the ones that admit when they don't know it and they ask for advice when they need it. And for me, that was actually a big discovery in India. I was in such an alien environment that I decided I was going to ask for advice and check your ego at the door, as they say. And I asked a lot of people for advice. Now, when you get advice, it's not always the advice you want to hear. And you don't necessarily have to act on the advice, but the action of asking for advice does a few things. It makes the other person feel good, by the way, when you ask for advice, but also you get different perspectives. And sometimes it reaffirms where you wanted to go. So you might have thought, I need to go in this direction, but I'm just going to ask for advice just in case before I make the decision. The advice you get might say, no, you should go in this direction. At the end of the day, you might still decide to go this way. That's okay. But the process of asking and absorbing advice is really important. That's such an important muscle for future-ready leaders.
Yeah, I think, the challenge leaders often can have is that, since you're in that position, it feels like your team looks up to you for advice. So you got to be the one that knows everything, right? So then, when you don't know, having that humility to say, actually, you know what, I don't know this. And that's why I have a great team. I've got this amazing team around me that probably have the advice and answers to my questions. So just being able to, be humble and get that advice. And, and like you said, when you ask for advice, they feel special as well. The boss asked me, what do I know? And that also, raises their engagement with the organization and feel that their voice is heard and opinions are, part of it.
Yeah.
So
Robert, let me add one point on that. Okay.
Sure.
4 words I discovered that were in many ways game changing for me as a leader. Instead of saying, I think, as you said, leaders are typically in the telling mode, right?
Yeah.
I shifted to asking this question. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
And that's tough for a lot of leaders to do because we have grown up in a world where, as you said, we're supposed to have the answers, right? So you walk into the room, there's an issue, a challenge. So you say, well, I think we should do this, or you should do this, or do this, right?
Yeah.
The moment you take a step back and say, even if you have the solution in your mind and you say, what do you think? And you take the time to listen to people to get their thoughts. You've triggered their creativity. You've also kind of given it back to them, ownership as well. And you might just discover they have a fantastic idea. But if you didn't ask that question, what do you think? You would have never gotten to that potential solution. So it's so important. Man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and these days you're doing coaching with Take 5 Global, and you've coached expat leaders working in Japan, Japanese leaders stepping into global roles. You've coached me, you've coached some of my leadership team. So thank you for that. What advice do you give, when you're coaching leaders about adapting beyond their cultural comfort zone, right? So we try to get out of our comfort zone, but then you've add culture on top of that. It complicates. Yeah. So what advice do you give?
Yeah. Well, hey, it's not easy. So let's start with that. It's not easy. By the time you get to this new place, again, let's say you've arrived in Japan, you've never worked in Japan, and we meet a lot of leaders, Robert, you and I in our daily lives, right? It's tough. And imagine this is your very first international assignment and you're sent to Japan from your home. Mm-hmm. You bring, decades of kind of, culture and learnings and assumptions with you when you arrive in Japan. And, a lot of those don't work in Japan, just as if you were to go off to Spain or India or, Mexico. So I think the first thing is, let's talk about leaders who arrive in Japan that are kind of suddenly parachuting into a new world and they're lost. And they're also faced with leading an organization, which is maybe not as diverse in Japan, because Japan can be quite homogeneous. And then on top of that, they have to deliver results because they have pressure. First thing is, and I learned this lesson in India firsthand, first is to go in with 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen more than you speak. It's so important to take the pulse of the organization, understand, what makes everyone tick. And there's 3 questions I would offer, by the way. Let's say a leader has just arrived in Japan or anywhere else in a new world, but we're talking the Japan context. I would encourage that leader and coaching that I would do to ask 3 questions to their colleagues and to speak to the 4 corners of the organization, not just their direct peers or their boss or their direct reports, but actually speak to the four corners, different levels, and ask these three questions. One, why did you join this company? And listen, be ready to listen. Imagine you ask 50 people that question in the organization, in various places in the organization. You're going to start to see a pattern. You probably hear some things that surprise you. Okay, second question. Why do you stay in this company? This is a very revealing question to ask. And then the third question, which people love. If you were the CEO, or if you were in my role, whatever my role is, if there's one thing you could change, what would it be? Yeah. Now imagine you've got a notebook and you got a pencil, or you've got an iPad or whatever it is, a tablet, and you're asking these questions and you're taking notes, and ask 50 people. In my case, by the way, in India, in a massive organization, I spent 3 months and I talked to 150 people one-on-one, 30 minutes each, and I asked those three questions. Around that, I got to know each of the people. So flying to different cities and learning about, the local kind of flavor, as well as meeting people, is so important in the beginning. I would encourage leaders, whether you've just arrived in Japan or you've been here a while and you may be struggling a little bit to make change, getting frustrated, take some time to do a pulse check and ask those three questions. You'll be amazed at what you hear. Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah, I think that's definitely very empowering for a new leader in going into a new country, to start. Because there's so much cultural nuance that you're not aware of. You can read up you can do all your research, but then what the reality is quite often different, right? So yeah. So Paul, from a park bench in Osaka to the CEO's office, that's quite an achievement, right? What's the one piece of advice you'd give young professionals in Asia today who dream of becoming strong, multicultural leaders like you?
Well, again, thank you. I often think back to that park bench. I revisit it from time to time as well, but always it's important to remember where we. Oh, I don't know if it's the same one, honestly, Robert, but I've adopted a bench there that I would say that's probably the bench where I was. But, I think to your point, we should always remember where we came from. And I don't think I've ever met a leader who started at the top, who said, I started from day one I was here. Everyone came from somewhere. And I would even take it one step further. We all came from the dirt, right? The dirt. And the Japanese phrase is gemba, the ground floor. We all started somewhere on it. We all have stories of those early jobs we did, coming up as young people along the way. So that's fine. That's great. That should be, in a way, a badge of honor. But then also not leaving that behind. And sometimes leaders fall in the trap of forgetting where they came from. If you want to engage and connect with people, it's important to remember where you came from and also share that with people. So in my presentations to new onboards, new colleagues joining our company, back in the day, I would have a presentation where I showed that photo of me at 22 with a backpack arriving in Osaka. So all the 20-something-year-olds in the room immediately think, wow, the CEO is a human.
Yeah.
So back to the multicultural leader thing, it's the same sort of thing. Leader as human. Yeah. Really, it doesn't matter where you lead. This is a universal trait of effective leaders. Leader as human. Kind of showing your true self, right? That's one. I think the other thing is understanding the local culture. A wonderful piece of advice I got from an Indian friend who lives in Tokyo before I left for the massive adventure and challenge in India. He said, if you were going to Canada and you wanted to have conversations with Canadians, who is one person that kind of is a connector in Canada? If you wanted to talk about, most people know who it is and would, kind of connect people. And I said, well, that's Wayne Gretzky, the ice hockey legend, Wayne Gretzky. All right. Most, I think every Canadian knows of them. And it's just to connect. It's hockey. It's Wayne Gretzky. Okay.
Yeah.
He said, you're going to India. You need to find topics that connect with most Indians. He said, start with cricket.
Yes.
And I knew nothing about cricket. Hey, Robert, and you know it. And he said, you need to learn about Sachin Tendulkar.
Yes.
And again, I had no idea who Sachin Tendulkar was. Well, I quickly found out he is, as you know, the cricket legend. He's a god, right?
The god, yes. Yeah.
And I would argue that if you travel the four corners of India, probably most people know who Sachin Tendulkar is. So I quickly read his biography. I watched the movie about him. Now I had some amazing talking points about something that connects with the local folks. And go on and on. India, you want to learn about Bollywood. You want to learn about the local food and politics. You really want to connect with people, right?
Yeah, that's true.
In Japan, it's no different. If you've arrived here in Japan, Same thing. There are so many very uniquely local Japanese topics, things that it's important to learn about, and then you'll be able to connect with people. I think a lot of expat leaders fall in the trap of living in the kind of the expat bubble, where they don't really learn about Japan, and that's a barrier to really connecting and engaging, and of course, delivering results. It's always about first engaging with people and connecting with them.
Yeah, I think the most often question I get when I meet Japanese for the first time, and definitely when I arrived in Japan, is like, do you like natto, right? Someone say, what is this thing, natto?
Yeah. Find out what it is. Give it a try.
Exactly.
At least give it a try, and make sure you give it a try in front of everyone, so that then you've just built some credibility.
Yes.
You don't have to like it, but give it a try. Yeah.
Exactly. Paul, let's wrap up with a round of quick fire questions, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
What's your biggest cultural aha moment while leading in Asia and Japan?
Well, the aha moment is that most of what you think is normal in your world where you come from is not normal. So park your assumptions on the side.
Yeah. What's the one leadership habit that you've picked up in Japan that you still use every day?
So I take a morning walk. Every morning I try to do 8,000 to 10,000 steps.
Okay.
I do that every morning here. I did it every morning in India. And let me tell you, through times of crisis, that early morning walk was a blessing. It was thinking time. It's good for the body. It's also good for the spirit and the soul.
Yeah, and the mind, it clears your mind, right? I like running in the morning, so I get it, yeah. And if an expat leader landed in Japan tomorrow, what is the very first piece of advice you'd give them?
Well, I would say, you're going to experience joy. You're going to experience frustration. You're going to be encouraged. You're going to be demotivated. That might just be on the first day alone. So get ready for a roller coaster ride. But, I would say that what I said earlier, it's so important to start every day with 2 ears and 1 mouth. Where you can really add value first is by understanding how things work and how people tick. And then you can start to make change.
Sure. Very good advice. Paul, thank you so much for such an engaging discussion. I think our listeners will walk away with plenty of leadership insights that they can put into practice right away. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Robert. And a wonderful series that you're doing. I've, of course, seen the interviews you've had already with people that I know well. So you've assembled quite a lineup. Glad to be part of it and wishing you all the best.
Thank you. That was Paul Dupuis sharing great insights on what it really takes to manage and lead cross-cultural teams across APAC. Thank you very much for listening or watching the Asia AIM podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And I'd also love to get your review. Reviews make a huge difference in how people discover our show. I'm Robert Heldt, and I'll be back soon with more conversations on how to win in Asia's dynamic and diverse markets. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Asia AIM podcast. If today's conversation sparked new ideas or insight, be sure to subscribe, rate, and share the show. For more resources, tips on doing business in Asia, or to book a meeting with our team, visit asiaimpodcast.com. Stay curious, stay connected, and we'll see you in the next episode of Asia AIM.